Today, I found something quite interesting about how loot works in Arc Raiders, but to properly explain what I've figured out, I first need to explain lucky loot. When you open a container in Arc Raiders, three things will happen. First, the number of items will be generated. Each container has a set range. Sometimes it could be 2, sometimes 3, sometimes 4, and each container has a different range of number of items that it could fall under. Secondly, the items for that container will be calculated one by one, with each item drawing from that container's loot pool. And thirdly, and most importantly, a roll will happen to determine if that container will also drop an additional lucky item. Lucky items are items that drop outside of that container's normal loot pool. Take this locker in Space Travel, for example. By default, it will usually roll 3 or 4 items as its normal loot pool. If it rolls a 5th, it's certainly a separate lucky loot item that isn't part of that normal container's loot pool. So if you come in here, open a locker, and it has 5 items, you know it definitely has a lucky item. Although sometimes in rare cases, it could have 3 normal items and then a lucky item on top of it. A lucky item, when looting a container like this, can either be a weapon, a key, or a blueprint. Now, the trouble is, sometimes that lucky item kind of sucks. Yeah, getting a hairpin as a lucky roll doesn't feel very lucky at all. But we can use different map conditions to change what the lucky loot items could end up being. And it's here that I realized something quite cool about loot in Arc Raiders that I was mentioning at the start of the video. The thing that changes the most about loot in each map condition is not necessarily the loot in the container loot pools, but it's the lucky loot pools. We all know the blueprint loot pool changes per map condition, but the lucky loot pool also changes. Let's take Locked Gate for example. If you get a lucky item and it rolls into a weapon on a normal raid, you're getting a hairpin, a rattler, or maybe an anvil if you're really lucky. But roll a lucky item in a Locked Gate container, for example in Blue Gate Village, and you get level 2 epic weapons, or at the very least a level 1 blue tier weapon. Look at all of these weapons and high tier attachments I got just by looting random containers in Locked Gate. This is because the lucky loot roll rolled into a weapon, and the weapon loot pool for lucky loot in Locked Gate is really good. Now this is actually pretty cool to know, because if we're looking for specific items, we can try to figure out what map conditions have which lucky loot pools. So I've started to try and track exactly what map conditions have what lucky loot pools and how things might differ. I don't have the most amount of data to go on here, and I think as I discover more, I'll share what I find. But today, I've looted 200 containers on a day raid, a cold snap raid, a hurricane raid, and a night raid to find out what the differences are. I focused on the same map, Buried City, and the same buildings, Space Travel, and Research, so that I could get a fair test. And bear in mind, 200 containers isn't a massive sample size, so it doesn't give us a good estimate of the drop rates of things, but more so the actual different items that could drop. I started with day raids, and the results were pretty painful actually. After looting 176 containers across 4 raids, I got 15 lucky rolls, which is close enough to a 10% lucky roll rate. But the terrible part is I got 9 weapons out of those rolls, which were of course all kettles, rattlers, and hairpins, and 1 Berletta. If I had spent that time looting on Locked Gate, I would have walked away with 9 epic and blue tier weapons instead. And the other remaining drops were 5 keys and a single blueprint, the Vertical Grip 3, which is a common day raid residential spawn. So the overall result showed that day raids were pretty bad for getting your hands on blueprints, keys, and even just weapons when looting standard containers. Now, sure, the normal container loot still had plenty of trinkets and craftables, so day raids aren't terrible for standard loot runs, but don't expect to come out with high value weapons, keys, or blueprints unless you're focusing on, say, weapon cases. Next, I tried Cold Snap, and the difference was incredible. Firstly, I think we should change Cold Snap's name to Key Snap, because the key drops were overwhelming. After 180 containers across 4 runs, I found 11 keys. I also found 11 blueprints, most of which were high tier attachment blueprints, something that drops as map condition specific blueprints for Cold Snap, Locked Gate, and Hurricane. I also found 6 weapons, so the lucky loot rolls were still rolling into low tier weapons at times, but I was getting far more blueprints and keys than normal, and I even came out with an anvil and El Toro, which may just have been down to RNG. We got a Barletta on day raids earlier, so it's hard to say with such little data. Overall, the drop rate of lucky items was 15%. Higher than day rates, but once again, we don't have enough data from this to say the real drop rates here. This is a very rough estimate. Either way, Coldsnap seemed to be the best possible map condition for farming as many keys and blueprints as possible, especially high-level attachment blueprints. Now, before I share my results for Hurricane and Night Raids, I need to address something. I can hear a rustling in the comments already. Some people are getting ready to type, "But Merchant, why would I care that Coldsnap drops more keys than other raids? It's not like I need to loot more keys anyway." Yeah, sure. Most keys, pretty useless, I get it. But some are really worthwhile. And as the game progresses, it's starting to become clear which keys are worth holding on to. The damn staff room key, damn control tower key, and town hall keys are amazing for picking up level 3 epic weapons during night raids. And also, if you're looking for specific blueprints, it gives you access to more containers per raid to loot. So for example, if you need a Wolfpack blueprint, being able to hold your keys for a night raid where Wolfpacks drop could be pretty handy. Oh, and the security checkpoint key on Stellar? That's a great way to get access to more security lockers, all of which can drop augment blueprints. So if you're really struggling for, say, the survivor blueprint, well, there's a bunch of augment blueprint containers inside this key room. And keys will now be useful for getting max score during trials. For example, the current locked gate loot trial has 2 keys in its loot zone, the patrol car and the confiscation room key. Being able to farm keys on Coldsnap is pretty handy. You can just throw away the useless keys, but hold on to the worthwhile ones. Now, the weird thing is, the key drop rates outside of Coldsnap seem to be pretty bad right now. In fact, the whole reason why I started searching for all of this information today was I spent 3 hours on stream looking for keys live, and I found 2 keys, mostly during day raids. So you can see how terrible day raids can end up being. I also did the same experiment with Hurricane and Night Raids. Hurricane raids were interesting. Across my 176 containers looted, I only found 3 blueprints, but they were higher level attachment blueprints, and I even found an augment blueprint that was just luck based on me opening a container that had augment blueprints inside it as part of that container loot pool. But yeah, the blueprint loot pool in Hurricane is shared across other 2x events, so you can get higher level attachments. I only found 1 key, and I found 5 weapons, which is quite a lot. We did find an anvil and an arpeggio, but it wasn't anything to write home about. I was actually quite surprised at how bad Hurricane did here, and I'm wondering if we just need more data to really figure out what's going on, because we didn't find many keys, we didn't find many blueprints, we mostly found weapons, maybe just bad RNG speaking. Now for night raids, we had quite a similar experience. My thoughts on night raids are, they are really good for getting more loot value, especially if you're looting key rooms. You'll find that the loot inside of containers is usually better, especially in key rooms. And there's also more loot that spawns just on top of chairs and desks and stuff, which does not happen that often in day raids. We also found a couple weapons, and the green tier ones were level 2 weapons. So I got an El Toro 2 and an Anvil 2. Typically, if you get a green tier weapon from a lucky loot roll in any other map condition, it ends up being a level 1. So that's something unique to night raids. Nothing to get super excited about though, considering Locked Gate drops epic weapons as their lucky loot rolls. And what is special about night raid is the blueprint loot pool. It's the only place that you can get the Wolfpack blueprint, and during my 4 runs on night raids, where I opened 178 containers, I found 2 Wolfpack blueprints and a Tempest blueprint, which is unique to night raids. You can get Tempest in the Hurricane caches now, but if you want high value loot, you've got a bunch of keys, night raids are great to do. We also found 6 keys in total, which is a decent amount. I think that's expected, as in the description for night raids, it does say that nights drop more keys. Overall though, my experience is Locked Gate is the best map condition for lucky loot rolls. The only problem is there aren't many containers to loot on Blue Gate Locked Gate. The next best is Coldsnap. Tons of keys and blueprints to be found here. And then we have Night Raid for weapons, blueprints, and keys. And Hurricane shortly after. And day raids are pretty terrible overall. Hopefully this video is a little bit interesting, and maybe you learned a thing or two about how loot works. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the comments. Cheerio!